we're recording.
Ooh.
Episode 18 or 19, I think. We've got Pei on, or the powerlifting physio, or the owner of PB Physio. So I think David and myself have been following you I've been following you for a little bit now, and just because I think we both kind of started in that kind of powerlifting kind of world, and I guess even what we do now is very, I guess the powerlifting or the barbell movements are, the foundation to a lot of CrossFit movements. And you seem to have, a decent kind of reach within that field. And you were just telling us a little bit of a story off air. So we might jump into a little bit about you, your background in some physio, how you got into powerlifting, and then maybe a little bit as to kind of where you're at now.
Yeah, sweet. So I'm Pei. So I'm known as powerlifting physio on Instagram. I just started my company, PB Physio, about 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago. Focusing on a lot of strength athletes. How I got into powerlifting. So I actually was a physio, and I started as a physio, and I was treating more general population. And then I met like one of my co-workers, and he was like, and I was just, general training. I want to get abs, whatever. And then I met one of my co-workers, and he said, "Hey, why don't you try powerlifting?" So I said, "But I've heard like I can't deadlift. I hurt my back a while ago, but I did it and it was great." So I like got really hooked. And he said, "Hey, head up to your first powerlifting comp." And I'm like, "Okay." And at first, I didn't really want to head up to a powerlifting comp because, like, I used to have like performance anxiety, so I didn't really like going in front of people. But I was like, you know what? Just challenge myself and do it, and that will I know if you keep putting yourself into those situations, you eventually overcome it. So I did that, and then my husband looked up the numbers, and he was like, "You can make nationals," and I'm like, "Okay." So I was like, "Okay, no pressure, but let's do it." I was heading up to the comp nicely. I was doing 87.5 for 3 reps for my squat. I had done my top set. I did 87.5 for 3 reps. The second set, or the second rep, I fell forward and I felt something in my back, and I was like, crap. And then I was like, no, but I have to finish the program. So I finished it. And then I went home, and I was like, I couldn't, like, I couldn't bend, I couldn't do anything. So I was like, oh no. Then I'm like, it's probably just DOMS. So the next day I went to deadlift, and I picked up the bar, and I couldn't pick up the bar. And I'm like, crap.
I'm done.
So then what I did was, I was really stubborn about it. So I decided, I want to make nationals. So what are the numbers to make nationals? And I can do the minimum required to make nationals for the cutoff point. At that time, my boss and everyone was like, "You're crazy, don't do it, stop it." And I'm like, "No, I'm gonna do it." So you can either watch me or you can say anything. So I went to a GP, and I said, "Give me the strongest painkillers you have." So she gave me Mobic, and then I talked to a friend who was a pharmacist at that time, and I said, so like, and she told me, you can actually mix Mobic with Panadol because they're different, but they'll help you. So one's like an anti-inflammatory and one's a painkiller. So I said, okay. So did that. Took 1 squat, 3 bench, and 1 deadlift because that was more flexion that gave me pain. At the last deadlift, the guy that was handling me, the guy that was coaching me was like, "You sure you want to do this? Like, you can't pull the bar." And I'm like, "I've come this far and now you want to stop? You can't quit on me." So he said, like, "I feel like I need to make you sign something." I'm like, "Okay, sign it, like, give it to me and I'll sign it." And then he changed. So I was actually a conventional deadlifter, and I guess I couldn't pull the 20 kilo, and I needed to pull 90, 80, 80 what? I can't remember what number it was. It was 80 something or 90. he said, how about you change to sumo now? Because it is better on your, will feel better on your back. And I'm like, I don't remember last time I sumo. So then this chick just goes to me, just spread your legs and pull.
And you did it.
Yeah, I did it. And then I made nationals, and the problem though was that I could not get back to training for nationals because like I'd keep getting back on the bar, and then I would go 60. I'd manage to get to 60, and then it'll happen again and again, and it just kept happening. And then I think it took me a year and a bit before it like I just kept going back and forth like that, and I was just like getting really depressed. I was getting really like just I don't know, like you constantly hitting a wall, and then you keep getting weaker and weaker. And then I'm like, why is it that I'm a physio and I can treat the general pop to get them back to their everyday activities, but I can't treat myself? So I felt a bit like, oh, I was like cop out, and I was like, that's crap. And so for that whole year, I just kept trying to go back, and I started just reading up and more about like facts about like different treatment styles. I started looking up different physios and like finding out more about them. And then at the same time, when I went for that comp, there was this other chick that was competing that hurt her back too. And I reached out to her on Instagram because we were actually in the same gym in Adonis Athletics.
Yeah.
But I train in the morning at 5 a.m. and she trained in the evening. So I sent her a message and I said, hey, I can look at your back for you. And then I said, oh, oops, I'm actually a physio, not some prepper.
Hey.
Yeah, so she replied, and then she showed up at my house at night.
Keeps getting weirder.
Yeah. She showed up at my house at night. She took a chance, and she just said, all right, like, let's do this. And so I said, okay, I'll treat you. And I started treating her. And that comp, I couldn't pull the weight, but she actually managed to pull way more and like compete in a lot better condition than I was. So that was like the start of it.
Yeah, awesome. That's pretty cool because not many people would sort of, take ownership of that sort of situation and go, hang on a minute, like I'm a physio and I can treat, the general population, but I can't take care of myself. And, to be able to own that and then go out and better yourself and be in the position where you are now is fantastic. So hats off to you. Just out of curiosity, what sort of numbers do you pull at the moment, or what's your total?
And how much do you weigh?
So at nationals in October last year, I did a 97.5 squat, 65 bench. That was the record at that time. I think someone's beaten it. Deadlift was 130. Wow. Now I was meant to head up to World Championships next month, but because of Corona, but I've just recently done 102.5 squat. My bench, 2 weeks ago I did 66.5 for 2x2. So I'm hoping I get 72.5. Fingers crossed for single. Deadlift, the most I've done is 132.5, I think. But I can't remember. 2 weeks ago I did 120 something for reps. So
wow. And what's your body weight?
I'm in the 52 kilo weight class. So I moved.
Mind blowing. What's Amir feed you guys out there? He's got a ton of strong athletes.
It's the mindset. Amir has like a ridiculous mindset. Like if you ask him what he did like a few comps ago, he decided to go on his honeymoon. The comp was shifted to after his honeymoon, after he booked the honeymoon. Yeah. So when he was on holidays he had no gym, and yet he went to comp. He arrived in Sydney. 5 days later, he went to comp for States, and he pulled and lifted all PBs.
That's insane.
And all he did was like leg presses.
Yeah. And he's deadlifting what, like over 300, hey?
Yeah.
Like he's,
Yeah, like I don't know, 320.
yeah,
Don't quote
it's-
me because it might be too long.
So that must be a pretty cool experience to surround yourself with such world-class lifters, coaches, and be a high caliber physio like yourself. That's a pretty cool environment to be in on a regular basis. You're getting good exposure to quality athletes, and you're doing some amazing work with you. How's that sort of transformed you as a physio?
As in terms of in physio, I feel like the field itself, that I find a lot of physios tend to be too manual therapy based. There's nothing wrong with manual therapy. I feel like there is a place for it to get what you the strength you want to achieve, or the technique you want to achieve. But if you're just purely manual therapy, it won't cross over to like your performance.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So I feel like that's the problem, is there needs to be, so manual therapy would be here, and like performance would be here. Yes. So like athletic performance. There's this middle part here that a lot of people miss. Yeah. So once you do manual therapy to get some sort of mobility, the mobility is just passive mobility. So you can't utilize that passive mobility until you learn how to use it, right? So you put that into teaching them the movement pattern by isolating it first, get that movement pattern right, teach them the muscles how to use it. Then once it has memorized the movement pattern, you start loading it up, and then there's performance here. But what people tend to do is go, stop doing this and do this and this, but they don't understand that in order for you to get that movement pattern, to seal the movement pattern, you need to be practicing the performance part of it. So it is all rehab, as long they all rehab, and then as long as you tweak it to give an athlete, let's say a movement pattern focus before they train, it infuses into each other.
Yeah, that's
So
fantastic.
it's a very integrated approach, isn't it? And I think that's what a lot of people are missing right now. And I think even from a recovery point of view, I think we could kind of, move directly probably into like a mobility kind of segue from there, because they're kind of on the same kind of line, and the same kind of misconception, I think. And I think, I think to put that in normal kind of terms for someone that manual therapy, we're referring to like massage or some like soft tissue work. So maybe foam rolling, trigger ball.
Yeah.
And then movement patterns, obviously we're referring to what could be a squat or something along those lines.
Yeah. And then like breaking down those movement patterns. So if you're thinking squat, what is the ankle doing? What is the big toe doing? What is the knee, the hip doing? What is it doing passively first? What is doing you can assess it passively as a physio, but most importantly, what is it doing actively? If you have that passive movement, that does not mean you have that active mobility or that active control.
And that passive movement is what's a rough description of passive movement for people that aren't aware?
Movement. If I'm gonna test, this perfect. If I'm gonna test like a knee to wall, people love this test.
Yeah.
If I'm going to test the knee to wall, and most people say 10 centimeters of knee to wall is enough for a squat, and then you can clear the ankle for the ability to squat. But 10 centimeters of a knee to wall is technically passive. So your body, you actually push it into that position, right? Your muscles aren't actually doing it. You're pushing into the position. So a lot of times with knee to wall, if you push into that position, you can get 10 centimeters. Yes, your joint range is great, but you don't, if I get you lying down and dorsiflexing, that's you using your tib end muscle to bring it there to dorsiflexion.
Yeah.
That's passive mobility. Sometimes you can have passive mobility of 10 centimeters and it's amazing, but you have active mobility of 0. And then you can't actually utilize it to dorsiflex, which is bring your toe to your knee.
Yeah. So what that might look like would be, like an active there and a passive.
Yes. Yeah. exactly.
Yeah. So I think we can probably, I think we were planning to go down this route anyway, to kind of segue, as I said, into that mobility type overall quality of movement, especially for weightlifting, especially for CrossFit, because as we had an earlier episode earlier in the week, and we're talking about how advanced these movements are. So obviously what's a better way of, I guess, assessing our active range of motion? And then if we're looking to improve that active range of motion, obviously it's not going to be passive well, as you said, it could be passive treatments initially to create that short-term range. And then what are we looking to do to integrate that? As you said, we're bringing it back down, but what's an example kind of maybe through a squat?
Okay, I'll give you an example of it. Yeah. So passive mobility, when I test the passive mobility of a squat, let's say, the first thing I'll look for is hip flexion, knee flexion, and ankle dorsiflexion. So the passive mobility, I'll probably get them lying on their back on the bed, and then I'll move it into that position. Yeah. And then I'll test it. So usually I'll think, if I want hip flexion, if it's an ollie lifter, I want their quad kind of touching their last rib. And that's a passive mobility because I push them there. For powerlifter, you don't need that much. It'll be great if you have, but you can have like 2 fingers off. 2 fingers off is about 10 degrees off roughly. So for ollie lifter, I want 145 degrees. For powerlifter, I want 135. Then I know that passively that's pretty good. If that person gets to 145 degrees passively, you have that ability to get there. So it's not really a joint restriction. But then I'll get them, let's say, seated. Have you heard of this? Psoas leg lift?
I can imagine it, I think.
Yeah. So you're sitting, let's say, sitting on a chair, sitting up straight, and you're trying to block all the other joints from moving, right? So you're going to go into hip flexion directly. Sitting up straight, put your knees together so you don't internally or externally rotate your hip, and then you bring your knee up to your rib again. Yes, and that is active mobility because gravity is pulling you down this way. Yeah. You have to use your muscles to bring it up. And most of the time you'll see the people that have problems making depth, they sometimes can get that passive mobility, not all the way, but they struggle so much with the active mobility and they start cramping in their hip flexors. And that's the lack of ability to use your muscles to get that active range.
That's awesome.
So then it would come back to strength in that area. And
so
then
the
improving that
ultimately is, I reckon the answer ultimately is strength, but you need to be able to basically think of it like strength conditioning. You know how you have to constantly load up, but you have to start an easy exercise first and then you go up. Kind of similar concept. So I need to find out what exactly is restricted, passively, actively. Then I will give them specific exercises to target that range. So if I'm going to do a squat, I'm going to break it down to these body parts, yeah? And then I will get them doing a hip flexion exercise. And then after I get you doing a hip flexion exercise, you've got that range. You've got that movement pattern. Then I'll get you squatting so you can use the movement pattern you just learned into your squat. Yeah.
So that's a huge part of the missing link.
Yes.
Right. And which is what you're talking about and integrating it. Because my personal experience with physios is treating maybe the ankle. But a lot of the times the ankle or the knee, that might be the symptom of the actual problem that's caused the injury. And they're not looking further down the chain to actually go, okay, well, all right, we've treated and we've improved the restriction through your ankle, but what caused it and how are we going to build you back to squatting? And that's been my experience. I've never had anyone say anything like you just said before.
Okay. So
that's fantastic.
The biggest thing as well I find is that an athlete goes in to physio and then they go, I'm going to use Josh as an example because he's sitting right in front of me. I have back pain when I snatch. And then you go, oh, you have back pain when you snatch, you just assess the back, but you're not looking at the snatch. Like,
Yeah.
so Josh's back moved like really well, like into flexion, extension, everything moved really well. But then he has back pain when he snatched. So if you don't look at his snatch movement, I don't understand how you would be able to solve it.
Yeah.
So then what I did was when I looked at him snatch, he snatched, like I made him snatch in the clinic. So I advise, like I'll put a note when everyone has an appointment, bring your lifting gear in because you're gonna lift in front of me.
Yeah.
He came in and he snatched, and I realized that when he was snatching, he was, so in weightlifting, everything is about chest up and looking straight, like lats tight, yeah? He was so, in his technique, he was so high up that he was just not even using his muscles to and his core to maintain that position. He was just hinging from that joint.
Yeah.
And that's what causes back pain.
Yeah.
So we just needed him to switch it and give him cues, exercises that are easier, and then slowly cue him also in his training to use it. Because you can give someone an exercise to strengthen it, but if they've been doing it for like 10 years or whatever, like he has, he's not going to change his technique because that's he's memorized that pattern.
Yeah.
The only way to change it is to give him that exercises, teach him this is what we want to turn on, and then while he's lifting again, I just did the bar with him, and then we just slowly showed him, okay, now think of turning this on, and then he did it, and then after a while he just got it, and then he never had, like, his back was never a problem anymore.
Yeah.
But if
So
you don't,
you've just created a new neural pathway and a new movement pattern and made him aware of it. Because there's no way you'd be able to do that. Just go get treated, find out what the problem is, get an exercise to strengthen it, then go back in and put the weight on that Josh is moving, and be able to just magically, pull it off in that new fashion. So, that's a huge missing link in redeveloping movement patterns and finding out, where the problem's stemming from, identifying it, and then actually giving them guidelines to follow.
Yes. Yeah. So what an interesting thing is that people don't think it actually shows an effect immediately. So a lot of physios tend to be like, I'll assess and then I will just give these core exercises, and then I'll tell them to stop training, and in 4 weeks time, then I can get them training. But it actually works so well. Like it has an immediate effect if you target the right muscle for them to go from, I will get them lifting and then they'll have pain. I'll give them manual therapy exercise and that cue, and the next thing you know, they're lifting the same weight without pain. And it's not the bar, it can be like, let's say 120 with 60 kilos with pain, they can go up to like 140 without pain when they used to have pain in that session.
Yeah.
Within half an hour. So that's like so important how that movement pattern like just switches on, like your muscles just do it. But then obviously you got to keep practicing it so it becomes the normal movement pattern, the memorized movement pattern. Yeah.
So we might use that to move into pain. I know you kind of alluded to it then, but I think a lot of people experience some kind of pain, whether it be a little niggle or something a little bit more serious. And the first kind of reaction or the first bit of advice is to stop doing pretty much everything that they're doing, and especially what caused that pain. So just generally, like in just principles, how would you go about kind of recommending people to, I guess, that whole continuum of pain, and when to really hold back, when to stop doing everything? Is there a time to stop doing everything? How often would you tell someone to just stop doing everything and just rest? And when are the times, if it's more likely to ease back into some smaller, less intense weight? Okay.
So usually when they come in, it's also a personality thing. Like I'll look at the person's personality too. Some is like, as you talk to them and you assess them, you'll start knowing the people that just will go and keep going regardless of the pain.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also those that are fearful. So pain is like such a complex topic.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. So what I tell the physios when I train them up is that I'm like, pain is quite physical and mental at the same time. When you're rehabbing someone, you need to train both the physical and mental aspect at the same time. So with rehab, it's not just physical. Like physio is not just about physically making you better, because you need to get that person to have the confidence of lifting it again and stop them overthinking like, oh, do I feel it? Do I feel it? And because that fear is actually intertwined with pain. So if you read like what's it, Lorimer mostly, he talks about it a lot, about pain being a perception of danger.
Mm-hmm.
And if you reduce that danger and that physical aspect gets better and you reduce that danger, then they both recover at the same time. If you rehab them physically but not mentally, you will never be able to properly rehab them.
Yeah.
So, oh man. So I guess the answer to the question is I'll look at them. If I'll give them a general guideline. If it's like really some really elite level athletes, just like keep going and keep going, even though it hurts. And most of the time when you're heading up to comp, there is some sort of pain or some sort of discomfort. I'll give them a general guideline of staying under 4 out of 10 pain. And it depends on the situation. If they're heading up to comp and they want something, I will let them know you will have some pain. You're heading up to comp. How do we reduce it so that you can still perform? And they make the decision as well. Yeah. Most of the time though, I want them completely pain-free. By pain-free, I mean not like pain-free to perform the movement. Most of the time, if you know you're heading out to comp, you're gonna be feeling really like just sore. Yeah. And what's the difference between sore and pain, and how much can you handle as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was answered it really well. And I think that again is something that people don't really speak about in terms of rehab either, that whole mental side of thing, which is quite a holistic kind of approach, and it's embodying a lot more than just the physical treatment, which I think is super interesting as well. I think that's just where a lot of people kind of, is that what you see as well? Like a lot of people have that outdated model?
Yes, because it's not, you need to treat the athlete as like a person versus a body part. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool.
And I think, again, going back to my experiences, the body wasn't treated as a whole. It was treated as parts
in
isolation. So they were just looking at my ankle. They weren't actually looking at how tight my hips were, or how tight my thoracic spine was, or what my actual squat looked like. And hey, maybe that was the reason why there was so much torque or pressure on your ankle or your knee. So yeah, I really like that. I guess like Luke said though, is there any sort of point where you go, okay, enough is enough, stop moving altogether? So like Josh with his lower back pain, you might have backed the load off, but was there ever a point where you said, okay, you got to stop lifting?
I guess like how often is that?
And how often would that occur?
Like I rarely ever stop someone from doing it, unless it's unless it's like going on and it won't get better. That's when I need to be like, okay, it's not getting better, it's affecting the performance, and it will keep impacting the performance. You need to pull it down. It's a harder question only because it needs to be like very tailored to the person. If I give a straight answer, like the general pop, I'd say 3 out of 10, under 3 out of 10. You know, but it depends on like their competition. It depends on, for me, if they're not getting better and it's getting worse and worse and it's still not getting better after 2 to 3 weeks, I'll start pulling their weight down. And I'm like, okay, you need to change that, because that's not going to help you get better. It's getting worse. That we need to like pull it back all the way down.
Yeah.
I guess the answer that I was looking for there is it's rare. It's
Yeah,
rare
it's
to just
very
totally
rare.
stop everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's what most people do.
And I think what you just said then was it was more so about adjusting intensity as opposed
Yes.
to not moving, which is
You all like, I will never stop them from completely training. You just stop some movements. You might stop some movements, but you can actually 99% of the time you can work around it.
Yeah.
Are there any clients that really have that psychological problem where they may have hurt their lower back before, and then it is just purely mindset, like you're sort of assessing their movement and going, well, everything's moving well, maybe it's just that fear? Like, does that come up often? Because I mean, lower back in regards to training weight seems to be very common. And a reoccurring issue, I would say. So there is times.
Yes. So there's heaps. So there's it depends on what the health professional previously has said to them.
Yeah.
Or what someone has said to them. So if you a lot of the times people come in and they've seen multiple health professionals, and the ones that have been told you'll never do this again, your back is completely destroyed, you have bulging discs everywhere, don't move in that position, they come in and they can't, they just have all these negative emotions towards their back. They have all these beliefs to their back. I had an example was, I had this bodybuilder. She's a elite like bodybuilder. She's 3-time WBFF champion. When she came in, she won 2 already. She came in and she could not. She told me, I haven't squatted in 3 years, and because my back is just screwed, it cannot handle that load. They've told me that I can't. Compression is too much. She was still able to train around it, but she could not squat. And so I said to her, like, okay, so just when I started talking to her, you start picking out things that they say that allude to the fact that, oh my gosh, this person it's more mental than anything. And sometimes it could have been a physical factor, but now it's settled. But because they're so fearful, they can't get past it. So I spent a lot of time just slowly introducing her to a movement.
Yeah.
And then I also spent a lot of time just sitting there talking to her about what she thought about it. And then I also got her to just do some like desensitization stuff. I challenged her quite a bit, and it's depending on the personality. If someone comes in and they're a bit more, you can just see how they react to situations. And I knew that I could challenge her a bit, so I did. I challenged her and I said, she was trying to pick up a bag off the floor, and then she got someone else to do it. And I said, why can't you pick it up? Yeah. And so she was like, no, my back. And I'm like, and then I kind of took her attention away and made her do it slowly, and she could. Yeah. And then she was like, oh my God, like, I don't feel it anymore. I'm like, yeah, it's because we took the attention away from it. Yeah. This doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah. Well, someone's embedded a hell of a lot of fear in her mind about a movement being dangerous. And when we come and see people that are specialized in that field, like we trust you guys. So when people tell you
that's why it's so important in what you say to someone. Like, if you say to someone as a health professional, they've come to you for help as a health professional, so obviously they think that you know. Like, usually when you go to a professional, you think, oh yeah, you must know a lot. Yeah. And if you say something like, no, your back is completely screwed, that puts a lot of fear into that person.
Yeah.
She was able to squat after an hour and a half. She squatted 40 kilos and after an hour and a half of me just treating her, talking to her, getting her moving. She squatted 40 kilos in Adonis, Paddington, right after. We went Yeah, and then her coach was freaking out. It was really funny, and then she did it, and it was like great. Yeah.
So you used you built a relationship with her where she trusted in you to try it again, and yeah, like you said, slowly introduced it and desensitized it, and
Yes.
there she goes. That's cool.
Yeah.
Talking about backs, I think Luke's got a.
Yeah, I think we might kind of move into some common misconceptions, myths, and just some general questions that myself and David had. So you work a lot with the powerlifting scene, and I think over the last couple of years, I think the deadlift is one of the ones that people think, as you kind of alluded to before, are bad for your back, and I think it's one of the ones that people butcher quite a lot. I think I've noticed, I don't know if anyone else has, but over the last couple of years, it's been almost progressive in people pulling and deadlifting with a flex spine. So I know this is a bit of a can of worms, but when is that necessary? Do we have to start with some amount of flexion first to mitigate the flexion, throughout the lift? Or is it a case of just neutral spine as much as we can? Or is it a case of if it's moving through ranges in the spine? I know that's a massive question and a can of worms, but in general principles, where do you kind of stand, and is that one of the things that you see a lot with people kind of with back pain and stuff like that?
Yeah. So with the deadlift, yes, neutral spine is quite nice to see. But neutral spine, people think there are positions that you can never be in. And I feel that's a big misconception, because I think any position, although it looks bad, can be trained. So it's just a matter of your capacity, the capacity the athlete can handle. And if it's trained, like let's say, like round back deadlifts, if you pull the bar with a more low spine, a more flex spine, but you're able to maintain that position throughout the lift, that is not an issue. If you pull the bar with a flex spine, and then while in the moment of the lift, when you're lifting, it flexes more, or the other way around, it changes, that's more of an issue.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So if you cannot, so going back to the active control, if you can actively maintain the position of the spine even though it's in flexion, that's fine, because it's not doing anything else, it's just staying in that position. Right.
Yeah.
And if you think about, like, let's say disc, everyone talks about disc. If your disc you go into flexion, your disc pushes, the matter pushes posteriorly.
Yep.
But if you are in flexion and you're not moving from flexion, but you're deadlifting, then the disc just stays in the same spot. So that doesn't really affect it.
Okay.
So I guess one of the most common things you would see, I haven't seen too many people deadlift with a flex back and then see more flexion throughout the movement, but you might see someone set up with a neutral spine, and as they do that initial pull from the ground, then it starts to move into flexion. Is that where we're seeing issues arise? Like, is that dangerous?
So when you go in from neutral and then you flex, yes, that's a problem. Yeah. But a lot of times also you I don't know, it's a very small thing to see in terms of after they pull, it changes very slightly, and that's a problem too.
Okay. And what about starting in like a hyperextended position and then moving to like a neutral position? Because I know that's common as well.
Same thing. So if they stay in they go into hyperextended and then they go to neutral, that means that their spine has moved into a certain position, and eventually that'll be an effect. That'll have an effect on their facets or whatever. There'll be an extension pain somewhere. But sorry.
So essentially, we want to set the spine, and the spine, well, it becomes dangerous for the spine when the spine starts to move with external load. So if we set the spine either flexed or neutral and we move, it doesn't change, we're okay. But when we start to move load and the spine changes shape, that's when it's dangerous.
And then the last bit of would be if you start in an end range flexion of your lumbar.
Yeah.
If you already start in an end range flexion, there is definitely a higher likelihood of you going out of position because you're in end range.
Yeah.
If you're maxing out and you're doing your third attempt of your deadlift, there's a high likelihood that it's going to change position.
Yeah.
When you're doing like PBs, there's no chance you're going to maintain perfect form. Otherwise, you're doing it wrong.
You're not lifting your best. Yeah.
So I think, ideally, neutral spine, encouraged to
Ideally,
maintain neutral spine in certain specific populations that have built up the capacity over time. A small amount of flexion is okay as long as they maintain that through. And if you're testing maximally, you might see a little bit of movement.
Yes.
Through.
So in Chinese Ollie lifters, so Chinese Ollie lifters they practice a lot of technique, like really, really good technique, but their accessories involve round back snatch.
Right. And a lot of like, while we're on the subject, a lot of like hyperextension kind of stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that if they go out of position in their third attempt in their comms, they can actually recover from it.
So they're just ready
strong.
Resilient. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And which is why like movements that people think are like, oh, that doesn't look right. You can actually train that if you increase the load slowly.
Yeah.
Incrementally. Yeah.
That's awesome. And then
that covered it really well.
Covered it really well. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm loving these responses. It's pretty much.
I'm like, I need to stop talking so they can talk.
No. This is what it's about. Like, we want you to answer it. Where we want to pick your brain. You're the expert. So, and this is what we want our clients to hear. So I think
we might move into. I kind of alluded to it before a bit of mobility work, because I think CrossFitters struggle. Especially with overall movement quality. And as we said, weightlifting is quite high demands for certain ranges. So if someone was looking to improve, I know we talked about the hip and stuff like that, but looking to improve their mobility, are we looking at it through like a strength through range kind of perspective? Are we looking to generally principles, are we looking to create some short-term kind of range through there and then look for strength work? I know a lot of people on their kind of rest days or their mobility days, they're doing a lot of static stretching, a lot of trigger ball work, and they're not having that integrated approach where they're using that short-term range after they've created it, essentially.
So in terms of CrossFitters, like they have the Olympic weightlifting component, the gymnastics component, that they need like mobility in, tend to find static stretch. Okay, so we'll talk about trigger ball and
another can of worms
and stretching first. So I feel like all of those are necessary, exactly like manual therapy. It gets you that mobility, that passive mobility, but I would actually encourage them to then do some end range FRC stuff, or like some movement patterning to maintain that passive mobility that they just got. In terms of, let's talk static stretching first. So in terms of static stretching, it is quite useful, especially in like gymnastics and like, so I see quite a few divers as well. Josh's sister, she does a lot of static stretching, and that is really good for her because that allows her to get into the positions easily. That feeling of getting to those positions easily. If you think of static stretching, you are putting the muscle to that point where you can feel that pull or that stretch. Now, if you keep putting that muscle into that point, if you keep putting that muscle in that point, it won't feel as much of a stretch, yes? So for her to be able to get into that range quickly, it will be really good for her because she'll get there really fast without thinking of that pull. Now, what we do as well is we give her stability and like movement patterning stuff out of that as well to get that range easily. So I think in terms of strength is very important to get mobility. Strength is very important to get hypermobility.
Mm-hmm.
You need that control too. So she's very mobile. She needs control in that range, but she also needs to statically stretch to be able to get to that range a lot quicker and without thinking. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's still it's rarely just having one type of you're not just static stretching alone, you're not just trigger balling alone, you're not just doing these certain things alone, you're pairing it with something else that's going to be more specific to what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. So you would still do
So let's
kind of mobility work, any kind of stretching, but you would pair it with like some active mobility, some movement patterning. And the other thing is, if you're whoa, everything, my brain's going everywhere.
Yeah, I can see it.
Let's say, for example, let's say for a lot of people, when we're cleaning or we're snatching in CrossFit, I guess the thoracic spine's quite a bit of an issue. Is just sitting on the foam roller and mobilizing that area a couple of times a week, is that going to improve their front rack? And I know there's a lot more to the front rack than just the T-spine, the overhead position, or do they need to really be strengthening and completely mobilizing the whole area as well? Is, I guess, what we're sort of getting to.
Front rack, definitely stretching will not help you get there. It will help you feel like you can get there for a bit, but it will, like, once you start putting on load, it will not help you get there. So in terms of that, if you just stretch, you won't improve. You need to stretch or release, and then get that end range with that activation work. Like, find out why you can't front rack. So if you go to front rack, you've got elbow flexion, you've got thoracic extension, you've got wrist extension, you've got your neural ulnar mobility kind of thing. You need a lot of tricep strength. Okay, this is another thing. So people love the concentric phase of stuff, but they never go in the eccentric phase of things. Yeah. So in this position, you're thinking this is elbow flexion in my front rack. This is also eccentric elbow extension.
Yeah.
So I need my tricep to be strong enough in a lengthened position to be able to get there. If my triceps are weak, I have no chance of getting my tricep lengthened eccentrically to get to that position. That's awesome. I actually give tricep exercises to people to get that front rack, because if I can pull out, but I can't bring it back in. So if I'm doing a tricep push down, if I can't bring it back in with control, there's no chance I'm going to be able to do it. Yeah.
So like, I might try and mobilize the T-spine for a bit, and then I might grab a barbell and spend some time doing some controlled front squats, really focusing on keeping my chest proud, my elbows high, to improve that position before going and then cleaning or doing some heavy snatching. Like, am I trying to mobilize and then activate to get into a better position?
So you're going to mobilize. So let's say thoracic spine. I would mobilize thoracic foam roller, right? And then I might do my lats to get position. But I need the middle point before you do your front squats. I need the middle point, which is the activation. What activation will I do? I do some prone thoracic extensions and get those muscles activating.
Yeah, awesome.
That will get the position better. I'll do some lat eccentric. So I'll pull down, but I'll let it pull. I'll like control the eccentric component of it. Then I'll go into my front squat.
Yeah. So that's perfect. I guess what we're sort of getting at is a majority of people are just spending time on a trigger ball or a foam roller and expecting to get results. They're, again, not implementing those activation, strengthening.
That like just the foam roller and just the trigger ball won't really do much. It'll make you feel good though. Like, I don't think don't do it. I won't say stop doing it. It'll make you feel good, but you need to capture that capture that range as
Yeah.
soon as possible.
Yeah.
And how you do that is by using those muscles, activating the right components. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So it's like the same thing, well, a similar kind of principle used to rehab an injury to kind of prehab.
Yeah. And also,
essentially.
rehab is quite similar to strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very similar.
Just a bit less, like, so strength conditioning in terms of loaded weight and stuff is higher.
Yeah.
It's actually, you know what, it's actually quite like very similar. Like, yeah.
I think there's going to be a lot of people listening to this going, I've been to the physio my whole life and I've never experienced this. Like, they rub my joint and put some heat through it and then give me some wall exercises and then tell me I'm good to go again.
Yeah, well, we had this CrossFitter come in. And she had 12 weeks of shoulder pain, and then she couldn't snatch, so we got her snatching in that session. So then she went and told me, she was like, oh, I told like all the CrossFit box, and I said, come to this magical place. Make sure you bring the lifters. I'm like, oh, thank you.
Make sure you bring your lifters. I think
make sure you bring, 100%.
I think that's a massive thing. Like, a lot of the physios and the therapists around, they don't have an area where there's a squat rack or a barbell.
Yeah. Oh man, that aggravates me a lot.
Yeah. I think that's pretty cool. Like, honestly, I've only just seen it as recent, like your facility and maybe one or two others where people are actually going in and being treated by a therapist, and they actually have a weights room and a barbell, and they're actually taking people through movements.
You really need that for like athlete development. Like, you can't, if you don't have any strength equipment, I don't think you can be effective physio, even with the general pop.
Yeah.
Because I think we still do get general population come in, and we treat them exactly the same way, but just like we make it easier, obviously, but they get so much stronger and so much like better, faster, like so much. Yeah.
So one quick question, because you've mentioned it a few times, weightlifting shoes, something you definitely recommend when squatting or doing Olympic lifting? Like, is it a must, or what's your thoughts around that?
Weightlifting shoes depends on the leverages. If you're an ollie lifter, definitely encourage you to have weightlifting shoes, because you want to catch the bar as low as possible. You literally want your butt on the ground. So any kind of leverage that it gives you to get deeper in a squat, you would utilize. So
you're going to benefit from
weightlifting shoes. But if you're a power lifter, it depends. So if you're a power lifter and you have you find it really, you're more quad dominant, you could potentially use weightlifting shoes. But if you're a powerlifter and you're so hypermobile that you can get your butt to the ground, think about the rules of powerlifting. The rules of powerlifting is when you squat, your hip crease needs to be below the patella to make it a white lights. So to make it a good lift. If you go so far down, you kind of are wasting a bit of energy. You can do that if you can maintain tightness, but why would you put lifters again on someone that can go so far down when the rules is just hip below knee crease? It's kind of a waste of energy.
Is that why most powerlifters low bar back squat? Sorry.
Yeah. So it depends on the individual. And then, but also at the same time, you think of quad versus anterior chain versus posterior chain. If you are quite quad dominant, potentially you'd put some heels on so that you can use your push with your toes and use those quads to get you standing up. If you are a lot more posterior chain dominant, then you would use flats because you want to utilize your heel push.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
But if you're a posterior chain lifter that's very strong in your posterior chain, but you wanted to strengthen your quads, then I'll put lifters on you.
Yeah. You don't just ignore that weakness, do you? You're going to benefit from strengthening both.
every little thing is important. Like especially when you get super elite, every little thing that can be changed by like 1 centimeter or 1 millimeter is an improvement
It's
performance.
gonna help. Yeah.
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 We might got one more question.
No. You got,
In an
Yeah.
hour.
Yeah.
what have you got for me?
Well, one more, if we can just touch on it, because it is a big one in CrossFit, and that would be some maybe effective ways to improve your overhead mechanics. You know, for a lot of CrossFitters, they're trying to do kipping bar muscle ups or kipping pull ups. They're also trying to snatch and handstand walk and all the rest of it. And that seems to be a huge problem, and where a lot of injuries occur. Is there any sort of tips to, you know, effectively improving it?
Okay, so for overhead mobility, I see a lot of CrossFitters don't have overhead mobility, but they do a lot of overhead movements.
Yeah.
So if you see, like when you get them to actually lift their arm, instead of lifting their arm straight up, they do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's upward rotation of the scapula. So I would suggest that they do a lot of more upward rotation of the scapula work, which is, so have you seen the downward dog? So it's like a yoga move, but when they use it, they just stretch. They don't, it's more than just a stretch if you can change the intention of the exercise. So if you go into a downward dog and you push with the palm of your hands, that actually utilizes all your upward rotators, which is your serratus, your lower traps, and your upper traps, right? And that can be like a good activation drill to get overhead. And you don't have to do downward dog first. That's the harder part. You can start off with just like putting your hands on the, and then pushing away.
Yeah.
And literally when you push away and shrug, that gets all your upward rotators going. That improves overhead mobility. But if you think about it, that's actually what gymnasts do as well.
Yeah.
And that's a sense.
I think my biggest takeaway from that is so many people, and you see it in CrossFit, they kind of just skip through those kind of warm-up movements that we might do. They don't do them with intent, and never really get any benefits from them. So that'd be a really good tip for people.
There needs to be intention in that movement. There needs to be intention to what you are trying to turn, what muscles you're trying to turn on to achieve what mobility to get them. Yeah. So
fantastic. Yeah, that's cool.
Perfect.
So where can people find you? Instagram handle, Facebook, physical location?
Physical location. So my personal profile is powerlifting_physio. My business profile is PB Physio. And I am in Marrickville. I'm also in Paddington. And then we also have Adonis Castle Hill, and Dooley's in Lidcombe.
Wow.
Gee.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Cool. And website at all, or mainly through?
www.pbphysiotherapy.com.au.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, that was amazing. I love that chat.
Yeah, that
took a lot from it.
Yeah, that was really good. We appreciate it. Thank you very much. I've got no doubt that if I've got any niggles or anything, I'll be in contact.
Yeah, I'm coming out.
We should actually meet up in person. Come by when this whole thing is settled, or send you a message.
Yeah, we'll actually probably even get you down to the gym and do a workshop for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great.
I think that'd be really fantastic. So we'll definitely tee that up.
Okay.
Awesome. It was nice talking to you guys.
Nice talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. Take care.